Hello there, this is Allison Johnson speaking from DOE. We're going to give folks just another minute to gather, and then we'll officially start this webinar. Thanks. All right, so thank you to all of you that have joined us here today. This is Allison Johnson speaking. I work for the Department of Energy's Water Power Technologies Office. And for those of you who are listening in on one of these webinars for our first time, this is the second webinar in what we're calling our semi-annual stakeholder webinar series. And really, this webinar is one of many ways that we look to provide information and disseminate a lot of, the things that are going on across our office more broadly. But it's also a way that we look to engage stakeholders. We do have a Q&A session towards the end that I'll speak about in just a bit. But thanks again for joining us here today. This is the second time again in our series, and the first one we held back in February. So before we really get into much discussion here today, just wanted to make sure I cover a few logistical items with those of you here. So basically, in this webinar today, we are going to have a Q&A session. So if you would like to send your question ahead of time, we're encouraging people to use what is our general office email address. You can see it here on the screen, Water Power Technologies Office at ee.doe.gov. We're just encouraging you to send questions there. That way, if we don't get to it during this webinar, we have your contact information and we can follow up after this webinar today. But the second way you could send a question over is by using the chat box that you should see in the right-hand side of your screen. So that will go to our colleague Jenny, who is graciously administering the chat box for us today. And that's also a place where you can express any technical challenges or other questions that you have throughout the webinar. And as you might have heard at the beginning of this, we are recording this webinar, so it will be shared for folks that could not participate here today. If, you know, at any point, of course, when you're sending us your questions, you don't want, you know, anything to be addressed over the Q&A session, just let us know, but we will make sure to keep your identity anonymous when addressing your questions. So I'll quickly introduce my speakers and then really turn it over to them to lead the webinar here today. So with me in the room, I have the Director of the Water Power Technologies Office, Alejandro Moreno. We also have the Program Manager for Strategy and Analysis, Hoyt, Battey. And we also have the Program Managers for our office's 2 R&D programs, Tim Welch with the Hydropower program, and calling in from Colorado is Tim Ramsey with the Marine and Hydrokinetics program. And that's me, Allison Johnson. I'm told that my title for the day is Stakeholder Engagement Lead. I have a title that changes depending on the day and what I'm working on. But I, in the Water Power Technologies Office, lead a lot of our general stakeholder engagement strategy and outreach efforts, such as the planning for this webinar today. So now that we've covered logistics, I will soon turn this over to our Director, Alejandro, to really highlight some of the key activities across our office that we've you know, really been working on over the last year, and also give a general introduction to our office. Although if that's what you're looking for, more of a general overview of our programs, I'd actually really encourage you to view the recording from the last webinar and the first webinar in this series. And that can be found online on our website, or just shoot an email to our WPTO email address, and we'd be happy to send you the link for that recording. Then after Alejandro, we'll turn this over to Tim Welch, the Program Manager for the Hydropower program, to really go through some of the things the Hydropower program has been busy with since we held this last webinar in February. We'll do the same with Tim Ramsey for the MHK program. And then we'll have a discussion with our entire management team on what was our office's peer review that we just wrapped up actually last month in early October. And we'll give basically some initial impressions from what was a really comprehensive office-wide review of our activities. And then we'll turn over to Q&A. So again, if you have any questions for the folks here on the webinar today, please submit a question using this WPTO email address that you can see on your screen, or feel free to send it in the chat box for Jenny to then send on us. And with that, I'd like to turn this over to our Director, Alejandro. He'll give you a brief overview of kind of our office and our mission, and then turn into some key highlights for the office from these past months.
Thanks, Allison, and thanks everybody for joining us today. For those who are very new to the Water Power Technologies Office, I'll give a quick overview of where we sit in the department. We're part of the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, which is one of the applied energy offices within DOE. And we're one of 4 offices that sit within the renewable power sector, the other 3 being the Wind Energy Technologies Office, the Geothermal Technologies Office, and the Solar Energy Technologies Office. The Water Power Office, here in the Water Power Office, we cover all of the department's research on 2 different technologies, one being marine energy, including wave, tidal, ocean current energy, and the other hydropower, including pump storage hydropowers as well. And you'll get a chance to hear about our technical strategies for both the marine energy side and the hydro side of our house from Tim Ramsey and Tim Welch, respectively. But I'll begin with just a little bit of information on what type of work we do here at DOE in EERE. And generally, you can think of that in terms of 3 different buckets. And the first is related to R&D, which is the traditional bread and butter of what DOE does, and investing in research and development efforts that accelerate the development and increase the performance of new water power technologies, while of course ensuring that long-term sustainability and environmental issues are addressed as well. The second bucket is focused more on testing and validation, where we spend a lot of energy, particularly on the marine energy side, supporting efforts both to put devices in the water to test and validate performance, but also to develop and ensure the accessibility of testing infrastructure. And then lastly, the third bucket is around data and information, where we aggregate, we analyze, we disseminate objective information about marine energy and about hydropower technologies. And really our job is to make data available and analysis based on that data available that would otherwise not be, that the private sector wouldn't be able to do itself, and data that really provides industry-wide or system-wide value. So before we go further, speaking of values, it's worth taking a second to talk about the values of the Water Power Technologies Office. And this is actually a new slide that we've put together and thought about quite a lot since the last webinar that we did 6 months ago. And this is really to give you a sense of why we do what we do and how we approach as a team and as an office the work that we do. And so we came up with a set of 6 values and 6 sort of rationales, purposes that drive our work. And the first is catalyzing innovation in technology and science. And that should be fairly straightforward, applicable to the R&D work that we do here. If we weren't interested in catalyzing innovation in technology and science, we're probably in the wrong line of work. The second is stewarding natural resources and really supporting the public good and recognizing that the work that we do and the projects that we fund, they're designed for the long-term benefit of the U.S. And U.S. citizens as a whole. So not just to promote necessarily one company or one industry, but really focus on the public good. The third is expanding access to affordable, reliable, and secure energy, really recognizing that performance of energy technology comes in many different flavors. Reducing cost is an important part of it, but there are other important components of a functional power system that our technologies contribute to. Certainly, reliability and resilience is a topic that you've heard a lot over the last few years, and looking at the ways our technologies contribute to those is an essential part of our role. The fourth is investing taxpayer funds wisely and with the greatest impact. We, of course, pay taxes too. We care a lot about using our limited funds in the most impactful and most effective way possible and making very intelligent choices about how we spend and how we invest our money and your money for all of those who are U.S. citizens and taxpayers on the phone as well. Fifth is collaborating and seeking input from our broad stakeholder group, our industries, and all of those who depend on or potentially could benefit from or impacted by water power technologies. That's one of the reasons we have this type of webinar, but as I'll talk about on the next slide, it's something we live and breathe every day. And lastly is being transparent and sharing our results widely. We're very cognizant of the fact that we are based in DC in one building here, our federal bureaucratic version of an ivory tower. And if we don't get out and talk to people, we don't share the work that we do beyond our walls, beyond the walls of the laboratory that we have, we're not doing our job as dedicated public servants. So on our outreach and engagement work, to an extent, why are we having this webinar? But how does this webinar fit in more broadly to the way we engage with all of you? We've thought a lot about how we communicate and why we communicate. It's critical to us that our dissemination efforts aren't just one way, that we do something and we say, okay, here are your results. And that we, again, in terms of using taxpayer funds wisely, that the effort that we spend on dissemination is really thought through of in terms of what are we looking to gain from it. And so, we have put together a fairly rigorous strategy in terms of our stakeholder engagement, what we look for from it, and how we ensure all of the work that we do related to engaging with industry and with stakeholders fits into our portfolio and helps increase the impact or increase the quality of the work that we do. And so the first goal of that is transparency, as I just said. Certainly nobody can provide good feedback if they don't know what we're doing. The second is input, feedback, ensuring that the work that we do is routinely informed by conversations with and input from those people who are going to use our products or likely will benefit from them or impacted from them. The third is dissemination. Certainly, we recognize that if the work that we do just sits on a shelf or otherwise isn't known or used, we're wasting our time. That said, dissemination comes in many flavors, and we tend to view it not just as, okay, we've finished something, here you go, here are the results, but depending on the type of work or the type of project we have, working very closely with those who are likely going to be using that product or project through the entire development of the work to make sure that we target it, focus it, and bring people in at the right time that can have the greatest possible impact. And the last is objective and accurate information. So not so much disseminating what we do, but collecting, aggregating, and analyzing the information that we get from industry as part of the work that we do every day. Equally critical on both the marine energy and hydropower side, that we can provide tools for all of you and industry members to make the best decisions that they can. So for those that know us, know that we do a lot of work through 6 of the DOE national labs. Each of these labs have unique capabilities and state-of-the-art facilities. The labs that we work with are on the slide here. Argonne National Lab near Chicago, Idaho National Lab, the National Renewable Energy Lab in Colorado, Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory in Washington State, and Sandia National Lab in New Mexico. No matter who you are, if you're in the water power field, you're a researcher, a technology manufacturer, hydropower operator, these labs can serve as resources to you, either through us here at DOE or directly. You can engage with them. Every year, scientists from universities, the labs, and private industry around the world conduct experiments at these labs facilities for tasks like high-performance computing, systems integration, material research, additive manufacturing, numerical modeling, wave tank testing for marine energy. And if this sounds interesting to you, know that there are a lot of different options for working with the labs. Every lab has different types of partnership mechanisms or agreements that can be tailored to your specific needs. Again, sometimes that can come directly through DOE, but all of the labs have mechanisms to work directly with private companies and other groups. They can contract out directly if you see some potential capabilities at national labs that are interesting to you. If you'd like to learn more about a particular lab, reach out either to us or to any of the contact people for the specific lab that you see on the slide here. And so the last thing I'll talk about is go through a couple of the key highlights from this year before turning it over to Tim and Tim, but some of the things I'm particularly excited about. We've certainly had a very busy year since the last time we did this webinar on February 7th. On the marine energy side, we had released the Powering the Blue Economy report, which identified a number of different applications in the marine energy space for marine energy to power ocean science and technology. And since then, we've announced 2 separate prizes, 1 collegiate competition, and awarded a number of SBIR grants for R&D projects with blue economy applications. In particular, I'd like to point out that one of the prizes we've just announced under Powering the Blue Economy, so the Ocean Observing Prize, which we jointly announced with NOAA a few weeks ago. And if you're interested in that, stay tuned over the next couple of weeks. We're finalizing the contest rules and are hoping that we will launch and open that prize very, very soon. The Hydro program has also been quite busy. We formally announced our Hydro Wires research initiative focused on the role that hydropower will play in the evolving power system. And through this area of research, we're deeply integrated in the Department of Energy's broader storage and grid analysis work, and specifically looking at the role that hydropower and pump storage will play in contributing to the reliability and resilience of the power system. We also announced a prize on the hydropower side, the first prize that we've ever done on pump storage, the Fast Commissioning Challenge Prize, and conducted a pitch contest with finalists in October. Through this prize, we've gathered a lot of innovative ideas for technology solutions to cut down on the time and cost of commissioning pump storage, and particularly getting ideas from outside of the traditional hydropower and pump storage industries. And Tim Welch will talk about the 4 winners that we've announced in a few minutes. We also had our peer review in October, which Allison, whom you heard from earlier, helped run. This was the first comprehensive review that looked at the Water Power Technologies Office's entire time as an independent office. Prior to that, we were together with the Wind Office, And we'll talk about this more towards the end of the webinar and share our initial impressions based on the public discussion at that review. We'll get into more specifics on a number of these activities during the webinar, but there are two things that I want to address that you've likely seen in the news lately, the Secretary's departure and the federal budget situation. Regarding the first, as you likely know, Energy Secretary Rick Perry announced his resignation just 2 weeks ago. He hasn't shared yet a specific date, but plans to step down at the end of the year at some point. The President has already announced that he intends to nominate Deputy Secretary Dan Brulette to succeed Secretary Perry. The Deputy Secretary has been at DOE since early in the administration and has a wealth of experience in energy and in Washington. So we have every reason to believe this will be a smooth transition. And onto the budget situation, we have a new fiscal year that began October 1st. I'd love to talk about our plans for the next fiscal year, but we can't, at least until we have full appropriations and receive direction from Congress. But those who follow this do know that the Water Power Office, like all of DOE, is currently funded under a temporary funding bill. Right now, it's set to expire November 21st. This is, of course, a continuing resolution. The House and the Senate have shared their proposals for fiscal year 2020 already. The House mark for the Water Power Office is $125 million, and the Senate mark is $160. So clearly, if we did end up with either of those, it would be a significant increase over our current funding levels. So with that, I'll turn it over to the Hydropower Program Manager, Tim Welch, to highlight some of the exciting work taking place in the Hydro Program.
Thank you, Alejandro. As Alejandro just mentioned, and I want to start with this, this was a pretty significant thing for the Hydropower program this year, in that this is the first time that the Hydropower program has ever conducted a prize competition. And as Alejandro mentioned, it had to do with commissioning pump storage, with the question being, how can we reduce the commissioning time for pump storage from the current 10 years to possibly 5 or less years, given with the regulatory process notwithstanding, of course. And we thought maybe we could get some new ideas regarding new innovative designs, layouts, construction management, new construction equipment and techniques, application of advanced manufacturing, or standardization of equipment. So we had $550,000 set aside in vouchers and cash prizes for this competition, with the winners, as I said, not only getting a cash prize but also a voucher to work with our national laboratories to further advance their ideas. So we had four grand prize winners. Actually, go back to there you go. We had 4 grand prize winners, 2 of which came up with ideas with respect to equipment for tunneling, and that was Team Livingston and Nelson Energy. Both took a very different approach, with Nelson Energy looking at modern tunnel boring machines for underground pump storage, and Team Livingston taking a little approach using more mobile machines to come up with a plan for a continuous tunneling process. Now, both groups are targeting a 50% time reduction in tunneling for pump storage. Our other 2 winners had to do with using steel dams for constructing upper reservoirs. Steel dams is something that has not been done in the U.S. for a number of years. They have sort of revived the concept, and they really think there can be some significant cost savings for construction of reservoirs for pump storage. And then finally, a modular closed-loop scalable pump storage system that can be pretty much constructed anywhere in the country without natural bodies of water. So now I'd like to turn in general to our Hydropower program strategic approaches here. So as you can see, we have pretty much 5 separate approaches that we use in achieving what we are looking for with more cost-effective hydro with respect to both the existing fleet and new hydro development. And most importantly, how could we can achieve more flexible and valuable hydropower and pump storage. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So as you can see in the dark green, we have 3 areas: technology R&D for low impact hydropower, modernization, upgrades, and security with respect to the existing fleet, and our newest area, grid reliability, resilience, and storage. And then the 2 light green boxes up above, big data access and management, and our environmental R&D really cross-cut across all 3 of those other buckets. In other words, with respect to environmental, that hopefully all of our projects lead to more environmentally sustainable hydropower. So the first area I wanted to just to update you on with some recent funding awards is under our approach of technology R&D for low impact hydro. So back on April 1st, we ran a funding opportunity announcement, sort of a two-topic area funding opportunity announcement. The first topic area had to do with innovative design concepts for low-head hydropower. This fits in nicely with our standard modular hydro program that we operate through Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and that's the use of standard modules for greenfield development of new hydropower in a manner that considers the stream functionality, environmental attributes of a waterway prior to the design process. In other words, using your design process not only to construct a hydropower project, but a water project that would help enhance the natural environmental attributes. So our funding opportunity offered funding for small hydro developers that would like to sort of test this concept and propose new and different projects. And we had 2 awardees, Natel Energy and Littoral Power System. Natel Energy will use a new design for a modern low-head hydropower technology that also, as I said, uses the best practice of stream restoration and whitewater recreation. Littoral Power Systems is further developing its prefabricated foundation for a dam, essentially using a form factor of a shipping container, and then now integrating it with commercially available fish passage systems and small head generation modules. We also looked for some new and innovative designs for pump storage systems. And we selected Quidnet Energy, which has a really unique and different innovative approach to pump storage that uses a geomechanical process that stores energy by literally pumping water into the existing rock fissures at high pressures and then releasing it again through a specially designed powertrain. Now, the other topic area in this particular funding opportunity was for modeling and analyzing the role of pump storage in asset and system optimization. And we awarded to the Missouri University of Science and Technology, GE, and EPRI. And basically, they are currently planning on modeling and outlining the potential role that pump storage might play in a future U.S. electrical grid that includes higher levels of renewables. So funding opportunity number 2 that we've done in the technology area was just announced last week, October 31st. And instead of looking at low-head hydropower applications as a project or a system, we are focused now specifically on new modules that can be adapted to a number of different small hydro designs. And our 4 awardees were Percheron Power, Natel Energy, Littoral Power Systems, and the University of Minnesota. Percheron Power will take an old technology, an Archimedes screw, and instead of using it as a powertrain, they plan on testing, operating it essentially in the reverse, and using it as a upstream fish passage system. Now, Natel Energy, who I just previously mentioned, will really start advancing its design of a fish-friendly axial flow low-head generation module. Finally, Littoral Power Systems that I also talked about earlier with its form factor shipping containers will partner with the Whoosh Innovation. Many of you have heard of Whoosh, is the salmon cannon, to develop a fish passage module using the Whoosh technology that can be accommodate multiple species and easily integrated into a modular project. Finally, the University of Minnesota will be developing a module specifically designed for sediment passage using a siphon flow or hydrosuction in order to pass sediment downstream when needed. Okay, so going back to our hydropower program strategic approaches, we'll now focus on our newest area, our grid reliability, resilience, and storage. And as Alejandro mentioned, we recently launched our new initiative in this area called Hydrowires, which is the water innovation for a resilient electricity system. And the mission of Hydrowires, as it says here on the slide, is to understand, enable, and improve hydropower's contributions to reliability, resilience, and integration in a rapidly evolving electricity system. So Hydrowires really breaks down into 4 major resource areas. Now, beginning in the upper left-hand corner, so our first sort of our basic area of research that we're sort of beginning with is value under evolving system conditions, looking at the rapidly evolving grid and how it can create opportunities for hydropower and pump storage. Looking at how does hydropower fit into today's grid? How is the grid changing? What will it need? Then we move on to capabilities and constraints. So given that, what is hydropower? What could hydropower's role be in that future U.S. grid with with more variable renewables? And given that, what are its capabilities and also what are its constraints? As we all know, all these non-federal hydropower projects have FERC licenses that have environmental requirements that must be taken into consideration, obviously, when operating the project. And so, as I'm going to talk to in a minute, we're really looking at how those capabilities and constraints work with respect to how flexible hydropower can possibly be. Now, taking it up a level, we use the information for both of those research areas looking at operations and planning. So given that, how can hydropower best align with what it can do now and what the grid will need in the future, given the integration of variable renewables? And finally, and probably one of the most important things, what new technologies are needed in order to optimize hydro's role in the future grid needs? Right. So on October 31st, we also made awards for research with respect to hydropower flexibility. And we really looked at it in 2 different areas, both on the individual project level and on the fleet level. On the individual project level, we awarded to General Electric, the University of California at Irvine, and the Stevens Institute of Technology, which will really begin to model individual projects to really understand what the constraints are and what the flexibility of an individual project might be. On the other side, EPRI will be looking at a similar problem and develop a methodology and framework for calculating flexibility, not on the plant or project level, but across the entire fleet to establish a platform for future flexibility assessments. So looking at flexibility both on the individual project level and on the fleet level as well. And so these are brand new awards that we just announced last week. So we are currently in conversations with these entities so that they can begin work in the next couple of months. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of, so we have been working for about a year under Hydrowires, along with our lab partners. We have a consortium of 4 or 5 laboratories that do a lot of the basic foundational research that we need under Hydrowires. And thus far, we've published, we have 2 publications out on the street looking at hydropower as black start resources, and a comparison of energy storage technology and cost characterization. That's a side-by-side look at different types of energy storage, including pump storage, alongside of various different battery systems as well. We have some near final drafts, as you can see here. I'm not going to go through each one of them, but I call your attention to the right-hand side, which is our work in progress, which is our foundational hydropower value study, which really does do a comprehensive look and a historical analysis of the hydropower fleet under the existing U.S. fleet, looking at how the grid will be changing and what hydropower's potential role could be. So keep your eye out for both the hydropower value study and some of the other areas, the North American Renewable Integration Study and others as well. And as I mentioned, we don't conduct our research on Hydrowires in a vacuum. Our internal collaboration are with our partner National Labs, Argonne, Idaho, National Renewable Energy Laboratory, Pacific Northwest National Lab, Oak Ridge National Lab, and we're also a part of the EERE effort for the grid modernization initiative. We also, on the right-hand side, just a summary of our awardees that many of whom I've already mentioned. Finally, we are reaching across our borders. We have a number of international collaborators, including we're part of the International Energy Association. We've also are developing a memorandum of understanding for joint research, from Hydrosen, which is in Norway, and we've also talked a lot with our brothers and sisters down in Australia as part of Hydro Tasmania. I'd like to finally talk a little bit about 2 other funding mechanisms that we have besides funding opportunity announcements, and that's looking at both our Tech Commercialization Fund and our Small Business Innovation Research Program. Now, our Tech Commercialization Fund provides a commercialization funding to the national laboratories, and this is unique in that these are for projects at a higher technical readiness level, but are now ready to begin the final push towards commercialization. So that the Tech Commercialization Fund requires that the labs work directly and partner with industry on tech transfer activities. So here's just a couple of our new selections in the lab under the Tech Commercialization Fund. Oak Ridge National Laboratory, trying to commercialize its autonomous benthic macroinvertebrate and larval fish imaging and identification system. Those of you who could be aquatic biologists like myself can appreciate this one. For those of us who have spent hours and hours and hours identifying benthic invertebrates, peering through a microscope until our eyes are crossed. PNNL is developing a technology and a software capable of automatically imaging and classifying these benthic invertebrates. So a real step forward for for our biological community. Also, with respect to fish biology, PNNL is developing their autonomous acoustic receiver system for 3D tracking and monitoring for real-time fish survival, and this is using our small JSET tags for salmon smolts. And the difference here is that their new acoustic receiver system can provide real-time tracking information, that you don't have to go out in a boat and retrieve the data from a receiver anymore. That this will lead to, as I said, 3D tracking on a real-time basis. Looking forward to a more digital approach by pairing the information from this system directly into project operations for more efficient both downstream and upstream fish passage system operation. Now, with respect to our Small Business Innovative Research Program for the last 2 years, we've really focused on developing environmentally acceptable lubricants. This is an area that has advanced greatly in the last 5 years or so. This is the first time we've actually looked at EALs and their applicability to the hydropower industry. So the three small businesses that you see there, Pulnox, Ricarbon, and Tetramer, were in our phase 1, and they were down. Those three were selected to move on to our phase 2, which will really work with the national laboratories to really develop their formulation to the next technical readiness level. Okay, and finally, I want to talk just a little bit about our environmental R&D strategic approach. And I want to start with another Pacific Northwest National Lab project. Again, speaking to any biologists like myself in the audience, remembering using your YSI dissolved oxygen meters to move back and forth in a boat to take DO profiles, and also some of you hydro owners and operators that have monitored your state 401 water quality requirements for dissolved oxygen using a single point probe source. This sort of uses new technology to sort of expand the measuring DO at a point source by using underwater robotics with a dissolved oxygen sensor. And so this will allow measuring a complete dissolved oxygen profile in several different dimensions in both a forebay and, most importantly, in the tailwater or afterbay, which those of you who have ever been in a boat below a operating hydro project know the dangers involved there. So this will use as I said, a robotic system to give you a better look at the dissolved oxygen system, not at one single point, but throughout the water column. So why is that important, and what is the unique application here? So I'll go to the next slide. So General Electric has now developed a new hydropower runner that can be retrofitted to increase more efficiently dissolved oxygen injection into the discharge of a plant. So we have partnered with not only General Electric, but Cube Hydropower Project, their High Rock project, to do a joint research project using our robotic water quality monitoring system in conjunction with the operation of GE's new dissolved oxygen injection runner. With again, looking forward to more digital operations of the hydropower projects, in that the data collected from the robotic system can then be used in modeling dissolved oxygen throughout the year, with those data then being tied to the operation of this dissolved oxygen runner for the most efficient and cost-effective operations of this runner. So this is a really great and innovative partnership of the U.S. government, DOE, and their basic research through PNNL, a turbine manufacturer, GE, and a hydropower operator, Cube. So a really nice and effective partnership that will really lead to innovation in this area. Now, on to some more new horizons for the hydropower project. Excuse me, for the hydropower program. Expanding into the new areas where we can have major impact. And we'll begin with talking a little bit about irrigation modernization. We have partnered with Farmers Conservation Alliance up in Oregon, who represents a number of small irrigation districts that have installed hydropower projects as part of their irrigation system. We worked with our national laboratories, Idaho National Laboratory. We worked together with them to look at a case study of how hydropower can really be the driver of irrigation modernization. And what we have found is that using a revenue stream from a small hydropower project can provide the resources necessary to improve irrigation systems by installation of pressurized piping rather than open channels, and more accurately using sensors from the hydropower project to more accurately measure flow. And what we have found through our case study was not only increased local energy generation, increased earnings for farmers, reduced O&M costs, and most importantly, reduced water usage because of cutting modernization, decreasing losses from evaporation. So once we completed that case study, we then thought, well, how can we, where can we go from here with that? And right now we are working with INL and Pacific Northwest National Lab to scale this work up to apply to a greater geographic area in the Western New York, building on what we learned from the case study and talking to stakeholders about what are some of the physical and jurisdictional factors that influence an irrigation district and its modernization planning. So what we're thinking about here is this assessment can be the foundation for an interactive visual tool that will allow irrigation districts to look different combinations of modernization scenarios, including hydropower, to see how hydropower can benefit the local system. Now, our area of looking at water systems doesn't stop there. We will also be looking at alternative markets for hydropower, particularly looking at small hydro and looking at new revenue streams by thinking of small hydro projects, not just as electricity generators, but as water projects. So how can we use small projects to use them as water infrastructure for environmental monitoring or applications even broader than the water industry? So the focus of this work will be scoping and stakeholder identification, and just allow us to give a look of where this work could possibly go. So we'll be canvassing especially the small hydro community to get a little bit better ideas of some of the areas that we can start looking at in this particular area. So again, also looking at hydropower as part of the sort of the energy water power resilience. So looking at water resilience. How can hydropower contribute to just water resiliency in general in both the power and water systems, and what ways are the two systems interrelated? So right now, again, this is a scoping effort, an engagement effort, and we'll be looking really outside the normal hydropower industry in the broader water and power sectors, really focusing on both water utilization efficiency, system resiliency and interdependency, and both water resiliency at the community scale. So this is a real different area for us to be working at in the hydropower program, but this is an area that I think has a bright future, and you'll be hearing a lot more about this over the next couple of years. So just we'll be at some of the regular hydropower industry meetings that most of you are probably familiar with. We'll have a booth presence there, so please feel free to stop by and talk to us and ask us questions and maybe give us some ideas for future research topics. We'll be at the 2020 Northwest Hydro Association Conference in Seattle in February, and of course we'll be right here in Washington during Water Power Week 2020 in late May.
Great. Thank you, Tim. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tim. So Tim Ramsey, our program manager for the Marine Energy Program, is calling in here today from Colorado. So I'll turn it over to Tim, who will similarly give updates on some of the exciting work happening in the MHK program.
Mm-hmm. Can you hear me okay, Allison?
We can.
Okay, great. So I'm going to give some updates, as Allison said, on the MHK program, the Marine Energy Program, and I'm going to concentrate on the updates since the last webinar we held. I did want to start with this slide, though. I'm not going to go into detail about the updated MHK program strategy and what we've done over the last couple of years to update our strategy. Definitely check out the latest recording of the previous webinar slide, but I at least wanted to start here, remind people that we are going through a strategy update and how we are organizing. So we have these 4 activity areas that are shown on the screen, and this is how we organize the work in the Marine Energy Program. And we are still planning to release the next, hopefully, final version of the MHK strategy soon, so stand by for that. But for the rest of the webinar here today, I want to talk about just some of the program and project updates since the last webinar. Next slide. So the first one I wanted to highlight is the as a reminder, TEAMR stands for Testing Expertise and Access for Marine Energy Research. This is a new initiative that we're starting up this year. It's a brand new initiative for us. We've been working on it for about a year and a half or so now. We went out with a funding opportunity earlier in fiscal year 19 to select the network director. And I am pleased to announce or share with you all today that we did make that selection and announce that director back on the 17th of September. So the network director is POET, the Pacific Ocean Energy Trust. And right now we're negotiating the award with POET. We plan to have that award negotiated by the end of the calendar year. And then we want to quickly actually start up and initiate the program shortly after. So I'm really excited about this program. What the program is it's a 3-year program, a total of $16 million. And it's meant to meet developers at their testing needs. So it's meant to pay for access to test facilities and capabilities across the country so that developers can quickly gain access to those facilities, iterate on their designs, test their systems, test their designs, and advance their technologies forward. And again, we want to meet them on the developer's needs. So both with returns to cost of testing and timelines associated with testing. So the plan is this program will have opportunities for developers to apply for testing access multiple times a year. We're still working out the actual specifics of the program, but it's meant to be open for opportunities multiple times a year, and we're calling those RFTSs, requests for technical support. So again, hoping to get that program started, and the first call will be out shortly in the next calendar year once we finish negotiations and finalize the award with POET. Next slide. As you've probably seen, if you followed us and seen some of the updates on the program strategy, we've placed a big emphasis on testing and access to testing, as you saw on the last slide with the TEAMR program. The TEAMR obviously will fill a big need in testing, but there has to be testing at all stages of technology advancement, maturity, and readiness. Models, prototypes, subscale systems only get you so far. You really need to get in the water and test. That is a very time intensive, costly endeavor. We've been working on a number of projects over the last handful of years, 3+ years, and a lot of those projects are coming to their in-water testing phase, and wanted to highlight a few of those here today. The first is ORPC, Ocean Renewable Power Company. They went in the water back in July of earlier this year up in Alaska, partnering with Igiugig, and they deployed their RibGen device, a 35 kilowatt system. The first of two. They were shortly thereafter selected by the Office of Indian Energy to deploy a second RibGen device at the site in Igiugig, and we're really excited about this project. It shows close coordination with the local community, has a significant opportunity to offset costs as well as potential environmental impacts, and a lot of the project itself is centered around installation, operation, and maintenance, and coming up with new installation strategies with in river environments. The second project, Ocean Energy, we've talked about this one a number of times over the past year. This is the OE buoy, Ocean Energy buoy. It's a 35 meter long buoy. It's an oscillating water column partnering up with Siemens with their hydro-air turbine and the power takeoff that's fitted on top of the OE buoy. They've been fabricating in Oregon at Vigor Ironworks over the last maybe 14+ months. Latest update on this project is they are in the water. They have finished fabrication and they are currently on their way over to Hawaii. I think they're about maybe a third, maybe a little bit further into the tow, going from Oregon to Hawaii. It's scheduled to arrive around the 25th of November. They'll first go to Pearl Harbor, do some outfitting or checkouts, and then eventually make their way over to the Marine Corps base at the Navy's Wave Energy Test Site and initiate their 12-month in-water test. And then the third project I wanted to highlight today is with Verdant Power. They will be testing their tri-frame technology. It's a tri-frame with 3 turbines of 5 meter diameter. They're validating and testing the performance, the design of that project, also again with an eye towards improved installation, operation, and maintenance. And they have plans to take some of those lessons learned and be able to eventually scale up to a 10 meter turbine. Diameter turbine. This is just a few. We have a number of other in-water tests in our pipeline that we've been supporting over the last few years that will also be initiating in-water tests later in 2020 or into 2021. Those include Oscilla, Columbia Power Technologies, CalWave, Aqua Harmonics, and Northwest Energy Innovation. So we're really excited about these projects and the opportunities that come around when you can get projects of this size in the water. Next slide. So, we talk about filling the pipeline a lot at DOE, and we're usually talking about filling the technology pipeline, but just as important as filling the talent pipeline, so the next generation workforce, supporting academia, supporting researchers on their work, and again, supporting that talent pipeline. So another new program, it's a pilot program that we're starting this year, it's currently open right now for application, is the MHK Graduate Student Research Program. This is a new program that's being administered by ORISE. And it's meant, the overall goal is to get researchers better connected or provide an opportunity to connect them directly with industry and with end users so they can have direct feedback into their research, make sure that the research is impactful and applicable as possible. So the overall program is the fellowship program. It's open to students, graduate students who are in a thesis required PhD program, and it's a 12-month fellowship program. And of that 12 months, at least 6 of those months need to be spent on site at a DOE host facility. And a DOE host facility could be a DOE office, a national lab, or an industry partner. And the program will pay for travel to and from the host site. It will pay for travel throughout the fellowship to conferences and workshops. It will pay a monthly stipend, it will pay health insurance, and it will pay tuition reimbursement up to $25,000 a year. So we're really excited about this program. Again, it's a pilot program. We may adjust it a little bit going forward, seeing how this first year goes. But the plan is to be able to support around 8 fellows a year, every year going forward. I need to point out that the applications, I mentioned they are open, but it does close on December 9th. So if you're interested either as a student or as a host facility, please pay attention to that deadline. And if you are interested as a host facility, please feel free to reach out and try to connect with students and encourage them to apply to come work at your DOE host facility. And there's the link there at the bottom of the slide to find out more about the program and to actually apply if you're interested. Next slide. So Tim Welch mentioned earlier that last week we did make announcements and selections for our FY 19 funding opportunity, fellow 2080, our office-wide funding opportunity. In that funding opportunity, there were 3 topics around marine energy shown here. The first topic was around modular technologies and river current applications. So this is meant to target low flow applications around a half meter per second to 2 meters per second, and also meant to be modular systems, again with an eye towards installation, operation, and maintenance. There has to be some sort of novel or innovative idea that they're testing in the installation, operations, and maintenance area. So we did select 3 projects in this topic area: Ocean Renewable Power Company, ABB, and Purdue. We're currently in negotiations with all these awards right now. For this topic area, the current energy topic area, there is a built-in down select. So the plan is to fund phase 1, the design phase, which goes for about 9 months, and then hold a down select to select only one of these 3 projects to move forward to the final fabrication and test phase. The second topic area was advancing wave energy device design. As you probably all know, or most of you have heard, we are in the process of building a grid-connected wave test facility off the coast of Oregon, PacWave. So this topic area was meant to start priming that pipeline, starting to fill the pipeline with designs that have the potential to test in an energetic environment, grid connected at the size and scale you would expect for a facility like PacWave. Important to note that these projects, the scope of work under this topic area is only for design. It does not do the fabrication and testing. Conceivably that would come at a future time, but right now we're just trying to fill the pipeline with a suite and a robust set of designs that could eventually test at PacWave. As you can see on the screen here, 4 projects were selected: Columbia Power Technologies, CalWave, ITM, and the Stevens Institute of Technology. And then the third topic area in this funding opportunity for marine energy was infrastructure upgrades at the existing marine renewable energy centers. So we did select 1 project. It's a partnership of all 3 of the existing marine centers, PMAC, the Hawaii Marine Center, and the Southeast Marine Center operated by Florida Atlantic University. So University of Washington will be leading the project as the prime, but all 3 universities, all 3 marine centers are partnered on this application, and we'll be working with the marine centers during negotiations to identify some of those infrastructure needs that are most impactful and highest priority to help and advance the marine energy industry. Next slide. So moving from our funding opportunities into some of our prizes, Alejandro mentioned we had a number of prizes that we announced this year. And at least in the marine energy space, most of those came out of our Powering the Blue Economy initiative, PBE. I'm not going to go into great detail about PBE. We went into a lot of detail in the last webinar about a lot of the fact finding that we've done over the last couple of years to try to identify some of the opportunities and the challenges that marine energy can have in some of these blue economy applications. If you have not seen it, definitely take a look at the final report that we published earlier this year, back in April, summarizing all of that information that we've gathered today. But from that report, we sort of moved from the first one that we announced was the Waves to Water Prize. Earlier this year, we've actually just recently closed phase 1 of that prize, the concept phase. We're in the final stages of reviewing those concepts, and we're planning to make announcement of those winners, up to 20 winners from phase 1 here very soon. And then we'll be immediately moving into phase 2, the design phase, and then eventually into phase 3 and 4, the create and drink phase, which is the build and test phase. And as a reminder, for that test phase, that drink phase, we're planning to select up to 10 finalists, and they will all be competing, testing in the open water in a relevant environment, same location, side by side, for that final competition. Next slide. The second prize that we announced is the Marine Energy Collegiate Competition. I think Alejandro mentioned this very quickly earlier as well. This one also is around the Powering the Blue Economy, the PBE space, but more with the emphasis on market development. So this is for teams, university teams, both grads and undergrads, to compete, and they are to identify a solution using marine energy that could provide a commercial solution or product to one of the PBE applications in the near term, in the next 2 to 3 years. And the competition itself will consist of a market-supported business plan, a fast pitch competition, kind of like Shark Tank, in front of judges, a poster, and a tabletop non-working scale model. The applications just closed on November 1st, so you needed to submit an application to compete in this competition. We are reviewing those now, plan to announce those final contestants. The plan was to select up to 15 contestants for this competition, and the ultimate competition itself will take place at ICOE 2020 next year in May, and that's where that fast pitch will take place, and students will, the student teams will get up and present on their concepts and their business plans and their ideas. Next slide. So the third and final prize that we announced this year is the Ocean Ops Prize. And as Alejandro mentioned, this is really exciting because it's co-led with NOAA. So DOE and NOAA are working together on this prize. NOAA obviously being one of the biggest end users in the ocean observation space. So that's really exciting to have them be part of this prize with us. It's a $3 million prize. It's divided into 2 competitions, distinct competitions. The first is the Discover competition, and that's kind of crowdsourcing ideas for ways to co-develop or co-design marine energy with an ocean observation platform or system. So we have 5 kind of broad topic areas within that ocean observation space. The first, unmanned vehicles. The second, buoys, floats, and tags. The third, navigation and communication. The fourth, extreme environments, both extreme temperatures and extreme pressures. And then the fifth, blue sea ideas, kind of like blue sky ideas. So give us your good ideas for incorporating marine energy into ocean observation that doesn't cleanly fall into one of those 4 previous categories. So the plan is we've only announced this prize. We haven't actually opened it yet. As Alejandro mentioned, we're getting very close to finalizing the rules document, and we will be opening this soon, so stay tuned. But we're going to run that Discover competition, and then from there we'll kind of down select to the Develop competition, pick a subset of those ideas that were submitted through the Discover competition to build the Develop competition around. And there's 2 parts of that prize as well, design and build. So we'll eventually be building and testing those concepts as well. Next slide. So I also wanted to quickly mention 2 new TCF projects that we funded this year, TCF being Technology Commercialization Fund. And what that is that's a commercialization funding provided to the labs to help them transfer their activities, their ideas, their tech out to industry. So 2 projects we selected. The first was with NRail, and they're working on a project, the significant cost reduction potential for wave energy conversion devices with variable geometry. And they're working with University of Massachusetts Amherst on their variable geometry designs and models, their technology, with the emphasis around load shedding and taking a look at how the wind energy and their blades and pitching blades, that's been something that's been identified within the wind industry as one of those key innovations that has led to increased performance and lower costs in the wind energy industry. So that's what that variable geometry load shedding project is about. The second is PNNL, miniaturized long life low frequency acoustic transmitter for fish tracking in marine environments. So PNNL is working with ATS on this tech transfer project, tech commercialization fund project. They are looking at longer duration acoustic transmitters that can also track in 3D, with the ultimate goal of better tracking and understanding the movements and behaviors of marine mammals. Next page. The last suite of new projects that we selected this year is our SBIR projects. So for the SBIR round this year, for the earlier call that the Office of Science put out, we submitted 4 topic areas, all with kind of an eye towards the PBE space. So the 4 topic areas were microgrid for improved resilience in remote communities. Second topic area on ocean energy storage systems. Third topic area on pumping and compression using marine hydrokinetic energy. And then the 4th topic area on high value critical mineral extraction from the ocean using marine energy. So as you can see on the slides here, a total of 7 projects were selected over those 4 topic areas, Blade Runner and ORPC in the first topic area, Oscilla in the second topic area, PCCI, Applied Energy Systems and Resolute Marine Energy in the pumping and compression topic area, and then Triton Systems in the topic area for the critical mineral extraction topic area. So all of these projects were selected for phase 1 funding. So they're selected for up to $200,000 in 1 year. And then at the end of that 1 year, at the end of phase 1, they have the opportunity to compete to move on to phase 2. Next slide. So I believe this is my last slide, and we always got to throw a pitch out there for ICOE. Very excited about ICOE coming to DC next year in May. ICOE being the International Conference on Ocean Energy. It's the biggest marine energy conference in the world. It's held just once every 2 years. This will be the first time it's been held in the US and only the second time it's ever been held outside of Europe. So we're very excited to have this great conference, great event coming to the US and coming to DC. As you've heard, we're planning a lot of activities around ICOE 2020, as I already mentioned, the Marine Energy Collegiate Competition, will be finalized at ICOE 2020. So if you can make it over there, I'd suggest definitely check out the Marine Energy Collegiate Competition and stay tuned for more information on ICOE 2020. And as you can see in the top right there, if you are planning to participate, to present, final reminder, the abstract submission date closes next Friday, November 15th. So you just have about a week and a half left. So please get in your abstracts by the deadline. And with that, I think it's time to pass over to Hoyt.
Great, thanks, Tim. Afternoon, everyone. This is Hoyt Battey. So as opposed to Tim and Tim's discussion of very technical, complex, scientific and R&D projects, I'm now going to talk a little bit more about one of the touchier-feelier things that we do, peer review. For anyone who's attended an EERE peer review before, they're usually a couple, maybe 3 days in length, but the amount of planning that goes into them is really significant. I attended my first peer review 10 years ago in 2009, planned my first one in 2011. Luckily, I take no credit for the success of this year's, which is probably why it went so well, because I wasn't involved. But we start working on these about a year to a year and a half out from when they're actually planned. And we and lots of other offices across the EERE take these very, very seriously. They're one of the most significant ways that we get external public feedback on both some of the high-level strategic things that we do as an office and some of the down-in-the-weeds details about results and management of individual projects. So really, really have to thank there's a large team of folks who are involved in running this, but Allison was the peer review planner in charge of most everything, supported by Alex Lemke and Al Hewitt. So just I will thank the team of folks who worked on it until the cows come home. So as Allison mentioned, we held this back in the beginning of October, roughly 300 attendees over 3 days down in Alexandria, Virginia. This is about double the attendance of any of our previous peer reviews, which we do about on average every 2 years. That's a requirement within the EERE. And that increase in attendance wasn't just luck or coincidence. We very intentionally tried to structure the review differently this time around to meet a number of other goals, which I'll touch on in a minute. So I also just want to caveat the peer review report, because there is a lengthy, although there is a summarized version as well, public report will be coming out hopefully within the first quarter of the new calendar year, so sometime in the February and March timeframe. It covers roughly, so peer reviews roughly cover about 80% of our R&D portfolio over a 2.5 year time frame. So it is a lengthy, often multi-hundred-page document that gets into a lot of detail about the details of pretty much every individual project within our R&D portfolio. And so as you imagine, that's a lot of work for the reviewers that we engage and also in our staff and in digesting and making actionable a lot of the recommendations that we get from the reviewers. All right, we can go on to the next slide. So why do we do these peer reviews that are very complicated and take a long time to plan? Historically, we've used them and they've been very successful, even though they were smaller and somewhat maybe less well organized in the past. They're as I said, a really important way for us to gather feedback to inform the continually evolving strategy for the R&D portfolio. But this year, as I said, we had a couple of additional goals in terms of leveraging as much value as possible from all the effort that goes into planning and peer review. If you want to know a lot about what's going on in the R&D space for water power technologies in the US, this is one of the premier places that you can go to absorb and sponge a lot of this information. So we really tried to get the word out to a lot of new audiences and new stakeholder groups that are interested but had no other requirement to be at a peer review. I mean, what we had noticed is that in years past, about 80 to 90% of attendees were folks who had to be there, right? Our own staff, our reviewers, all of our PIs and researchers, and then a few additional folks. And this time our goal was to basically, balance that out and get at least as many people there who have a significant interest in the research that we're supporting, but didn't have a requirement to be there. And we were really successful in doing that. So hopefully we're like I said, leveraging more value out of doing these. And we also tried to build in ways for all participants, so not just our peer reviewers, to provide us feedback. And we did that in a number of different ways with dedicated networking breaks and discussion time throughout the week, more time for Q&A from non-reviewers during sessions, comment boxes, an end of the review town hall where everybody could give us feedback on either what they heard during the week or other things in general. So yeah, just trying to align this a lot more with our strategy for engagement and outreach and that philosophy. Okay. So as I mentioned before, there is a huge amount of work that went into the review, especially from the reviewers themselves. And so I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to acknowledge all of those individuals that participated. I've been a part of, in some way, shape, or form, 5 water power program or office peer reviews in my time here. And not to short the contributions of other previous peer reviews or reviewers, but I really think we had about the best panel of folks that we've been lucky enough to get significant portions of time from. This is really a fantastic group to work with. I think everybody that in the office would echo that as well. And it was really a diverse group of people across academia, the private sector, federal government agencies, and people from over in Europe as well. And so the marine energy tracks were divided into 2 sets, the hydropower into 3. Oh, sorry, you could have stayed on the marine. So you can go back to the hydropower one. Yeah, we've also updated some of the ways that we're consolidating feedback from them this year too. We had realized that some of the comments from reviewers weren't as logically organized or consolidated in the actual report. So we've actually put a little bit more onus on reviewers to summarize and consolidate all their feedback for individual projects to try and make the alignment of their views a little bit clearer to someone who just picks up the report and flips to a project and starts looking through it. But that also requires a little bit more work. So we are very, very thankful for all of their efforts. Okay, next slide. So this is just an opportunity for us to highlight some of the initial impressions that we got from the public portions of the peer review. The reviewers have given us their initial impressions and feedback as well, but those are behind closed doors, and they have a fair amount of time to synthesize all those views into what will be written public feedback for us and the general public. And so we're not going to talk about what they've told us directly. We're just going to talk about what we heard in the general public sessions. We heard from a lot of folks that this peer review felt very different from previous ones, which is good because we were aiming for that. There was more of a focus on office level and program strategy and the alignment of projects to that strategy, and more of a focus on the office's decision making in portfolio management. And of course, we did, as I mentioned, try to bring in more and more diverse groups of people. And this was really, the first peer review, as I think Alejandro mentioned, that our office has been a standalone kind of independent group within EERE for the entire portion of the peer review. So that changed a little bit of things in terms of how we organized the entire thing. We heard from a lot of folks at the venue, and the organization of the event itself were significantly better than past reviews. So kudos to our team there. We also incorporated a number of non-review sessions, right? So opportunities for the community of all the folks that we brought together for the review to hear from others' perspectives as it relates to the broader evolution of the energy economy or sustainability at large. also as a way to give some of the reviewers a bit of a break, and just provide more opportunities for different people with different interests to participate. The project presentations, again, they're always a work in progress, but we did hear that there were improvements. But we also heard that we need to potentially focus more on some of the major decision points in project management, such as major milestones, go, no-go decision points for all different types of projects that we have. Okay, next slide. In terms of office-wide feedback that applies to all programs, first off, we've received a lot of positive feedback and a number of comments about enthusiasm for the variety of funding mechanisms that we have available. I heard a number of things personally about the benefits of exploring new ways to interact with either us or the national laboratories in terms of small business vouchers, the Technology Commercialization Fund, lab vouchers for research, and some of the prizes and competitions that we've been utilizing in addition to more of our historical mechanisms in the past. And that especially flexible funding mechanisms that allow people to quickly initiate activities, and kind of this catchphrase that we heard was fail fast and fail small, as opposed to making really large long-term investments and failing big. Also heard a lot about the importance of meaningful, frequent early stakeholder engagement and dissemination. We've, over the last couple of years, really tried to increase our focus on this aspect of the management of our R&D portfolio. And I think that was taken very positively, but that doesn't mean that we're perfect and there aren't other ways that we can be improving as well. And that we need to think of additional office-level ways that we can help empower our researchers and our PIs to do a better job of this. And then lastly, we also, I think there was a recognition, and I would agree with this personally, that there are areas for improvement in terms of performance metrics and quantifying our larger national level impact or return on investment in terms of things like the commercialization of new technologies and the uptake of or the dissemination of some of the research that we're supporting. So with that, I think we're going to turn it over and talk specifically about some of the things that we heard in relation to the hydro portion of the program. So I'll tee some of these up and then see if Tim Welch has anything that he wants to add on these. But yeah, one theme that really just stuck out based on the discussion in some of the hydro tracks, and one that we really philosophically agree with, is that new hydro growth is going to be basically impossible if we keep trying to develop hydro in the same way that it's historically been. And so there seemed to be a lot of focus and a lot of support for our standard modular hydro portfolio, and especially the program's emphasis on the needs of new hydro as it relates to environmental compatibility. So I know you already touched on a little bit of this, Tim, but is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I couldn't agree with this one more. Actually, I was quite happy to see it, actually, which led me to believe that our message was getting through. So this is the message that we wanted to convey during the peer review, and our peer reviewers heard it. And I'm with you, Hoyt. I totally agree with it, and it's just, we're trying to, the challenge now is if we keep doing it the same way, so in other words, there's a new way, and we're just trying to define what that new way is. And I think we're part of the way there, but we have a ways to go yet.
Yep. And then moving on to point number 2, in terms of stakeholder engagement and dissemination, I read this as being very related to hydro wires in particular. I mean, we've been working to scope this and then launch it and initiate it and get a whole lot of wheels spinning in a really short period of time. I mean, it hasn't been that long that we've been, officially doing work on this program. And I think what we heard was that there's still a lot of additional work that needs to be done in terms of engaging with different stakeholder groups, and particularly some of the ones identified here. But yeah, I heard that in a couple of different sessions, and I agree, but I don't necessarily see it as a gap. It's just something that, yes, we need to do as well.
Well, I think we've done a pretty effective job reaching out to the hydropower industry itself. Talking to utilities and just different developers, and even our own power marketers like BPA. But I agree that we really need to take it one step further and talk to the ISOs and RTOs. In other words, we need to talk to the real decision makers with respect to the grid and how they view hydro and what kinds of information that we can provide to them to help make their decision making easier and a more informed decision making when as it pertains to utilizing hydropower projects in overall grid reliability. So this is right on, and we're already talking about this.
Yep, and definitely a lot of support for hydro wires in general. I think one of the biggest concerns whenever you roll out a large new initiative like this, especially one that's a little intangible or complicated, right? This isn't building and testing widgets. Well, there is some aspect of that, but there's a lot of information collection, modeling, and other aspects that can be difficult for people to grasp. But it seemed like the feedback was really positive, and that people understood the motivation and the focus and the intent and kind of the organization of the portfolio. So that was nice to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Also got some really good feedback on performance metrics, and especially as they related to the environmental performance of technologies, and that is definitely something that we need to continue to focus on and develop more targeted, specific, and appropriate quantitative metrics for environmental performance in some of the projects.
Yeah, I just last week, Hoyt, I attended a meeting, a hydropower industry meeting, or an energy industry meeting from the CIADI group, and performance metrics is really what we focused on. And the utilities, a lot of the bigger utilities like NYPA and PG&E talked about that they, struggle's the wrong word, but they take this very seriously. And I did gather a number of ideas of how the utilities look at their R&D with respect to performance metrics. And so there's a big effort right now for a lot of information sharing in this particular area that I think we can benefit from.
Yep. And last but not least, there were a lot of really good discussions and some feedback on some of the fish tag research that we've been supporting through a couple of different projects over the last handful of years. And a lot of potential there, both from advances in microbattery technology, or even the possibility for tags to be self-powered in the near future. And that has, such applicability even outside the hydropower space in terms of thinking about species tracking and mitigation of long-term shifts in hydrology and other impacts to sensitive fisheries.
At the risk of telling yet another when I was a young fishery biologist story, but when I was a young fishery biologist, I did a lot of radio tagging, and the advances that we have made with tag size just kind of is mind-boggling. And I totally agree with you, Hoyt. This has potential for really unlocking a lot of the mysteries about fish life cycle, especially pertaining to American eels. And looking forward to the day when maybe we'll be able to actually track an adult eel to the Sargasso Sea, and which has been a mystery for many, many, many years. So
it's probably where Atlantis is.
That's right. Right into the Bermuda Triangle.
All right, so moving on to marine energy. Tim Ramsey, you still with us?
I'm still here.
All right. So again, engagement and dissemination and information sharing was a common thing that we heard about. We also required that every project this go around have specific information about what their plans and activities in that space were. And I think that served to highlight both some great things being done, but also, where some gaps and some room for improvement was. Did you hear the same thing?
Yes, definitely heard the same thing. And I mean, just a little more on that. I heard that kind of across the board, the intent and the objective of the data sharing and information sharing that we're targeting is spot on. But there certainly there's more we can do, ways we can do it better, especially with the data sharing and making it more consistent and user friendly. So I know that's something that I'll be giving a lot of thought to over the next few months, 6 months, taking that feedback in.
Yep. And I think, definitely got a lot of positive response to the work that the national labs are doing, and especially in their interaction and efforts to get feedback about their work from stakeholders. But there was also a realization that it still remains in a lot of instances, not as easy or cost effective as it could be for industry to work directly with labs. But we are trying to take new steps, and the Teamer initiative was brought up as one to help address some of those issues and figure out how to make the best of the situations as they exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I heard that, but I heard it not just lab and industry connections, but across the whole portfolio that we need to do a better job of connecting all of our projects together, even industry to industry, lab to lab, industry to lab, SBIR to lab and to industry. I mean, the whole portfolio can be better connected together so that projects are informing each other and leveraging each other.
Yeah. Heard similar things in the marine energy side of things about performance metrics, about the love-hate relationship with the levelized cost of energy, and really modeled LCOE and all the complexity and difficulty of using that as an accurate representation of progress. I'm not going to say anything else there because we are going to have a lot of work on this in the next year to try to make progress. Anything else that you wanted to say?
Yeah, we metrics, LCOE, and all the other suite of metrics is something that we've been trying to grapple with since the program initiated back in 2007. So obviously still have more work to do. It's a very complex situation answer, especially for an emerging industry like the marine energy industry. The other thing I'd mention is Teamer. Teamer is another area where we'll have an opportunity to apply metrics. So same as learning from technologies, you learn by doing and you learn by getting technologies into a testing environment. Same with metrics. So we're planning to, through Teamer, have consistent, repeatable testing, quantify testing, and applying metrics. So that will be an opportunity to maybe identify and help assess different metrics, when to use them.
Yep. And somewhat related to performance metrics, standards development, heard again and again that these are important. For anyone who didn't read the 2017 peer review report in great detail, our support for international standards development was the highest rated project in the entire portfolio. So we'll see if it can retain the title again this year. But also the idea that not just certain types of standards, but also things like more consistency across environmental monitoring standards or practices are important as well. And then heard feedback about some of the issues around supply chain and exactly what we could do to help address some issues there. That's definitely an area that needs more thought. And also feedback about coordination with other ocean science and technology stakeholders or industries. Anything you wanted to add there? If not, we should probably move on to Q&A.
We can move on to Q&A.
Teed that one up.
Well, I took that as a hint that we were running behind schedule. I don't know.
Yeah, so we've got about 20 minutes left here. So this is the last slide that we have before the Q&A. I just wanted to remind everybody to sign up for what we call the Water Wire, which is our monthly e-newsletter. Occasionally goes out slightly more often whenever there are big things to announce. And then if you haven't yet checked it out, go and interact with our interactive projects map, continually being updated. But this is really the repository of everything, both current and historical, that the office has funded. We keep finding something that we haven't remembered to put in there, but I can now confidently say that it is the up-to-date, accurate, and vast majority of the R&D portfolio. So with that, I think we're going to move on to questions, and we've gotten a few that have come in from people over the course of the webinar, and a few that were sent in ahead of time. So Allison, are you going to ask those and field them to people?
I will.
All right.
Yeah. So if you have a question that does not get addressed during this portion, please just shoot us an email to that WPTO email address, and we'll be sure to follow up with you after this webinar. But I think I'll go first, or I'll start with the more general office level questions, so things that relate to kind of the office at large in both R&D programs, and then I'll kind of start directing these questions towards the program managers after that. But so first off, I'll give, since this is not exactly a softball, I'll give this question to Alejandro. It is a question related to the budget situation. So you did, go over kind of the budget situation and mentioned the temporary spending bill. What does this mean for the R&D programs, and how do they function under this continuing resolution?
Sure. Well, right now, as we said at the beginning, we are under a temporary funding authorization until mid-November, which under a continuing resolution, we're funded at the same level that we were funded at last year, at least under this particular continuing resolution, which means we're at $105 million for the program. Of course, we are also thinking towards what we might do if we had budget levels that were aligned with what the House and the Senate marks for us were, which are $125 and $160 million respectively. But we can't do anything related to those marks, nor really talk about plans and how exactly we would spend that money, because we don't have it in hand. So at this point, we're making plans to operate under a budget that looks a lot like last year, with the same language as well. But as that, or if that changes at any point, then we will adapt accordingly. We're of course thinking ahead as to what that might look like.
Great. So another more general question about the office. This is, how does WPTO work with other federal agencies? So I think that's more of a softball. You can talk about, some of our great partnerships with other agencies.
It's not a softball if you advertise it as a softball.
Really? Okay, never mind. It's a medium ball.
We work very well with other agencies, increasingly well, I should say. I think I've been really encouraged both within DOE and with other executive branch leaders that I've met about the genuine desire to collaborate, to find areas of common interest, and to leverage expertise, to leverage funding to make our work even more impactful. A good example of that is the work that we've done with NOAA over the last year in developing the Ocean Observation Prize. We recognized early on that if we were going to help point the marine energy industry towards designs that were going to be most effective for ocean observation systems, we really needed to understand what the ocean observation mission space looked like and what were the specific technology requirements to enable that mission. And that's not something we know in the Water Power Office. We're really focused on the energy generation side. Luckily, we have colleagues across the mall that know this space very well, and so being able to work with them and work closely with their teams that really that lead ocean observation work and have direct stakeholder relationships with the broad ocean observation scientific community has enabled us to design a prize structure that is not just our attempt to assume we know what the ocean energy community needs, but is designed in part by the ocean observation community. Same thing on the hydropower side. We've worked very closely with the Bureau of Reclamation, for example, on a prize looking at novel fish screen technology, or fish exclusion technology, excuse me. And this is an area where we were able to leverage an existing structure that Reclamation had to do prizes, but typically they haven't had often enough funding to be able to follow on the funding for their initial prize winners to develop out a concept into an actual prototype. And that's where we were able to come in and work with them to offer the potential for potential best designs through their initial first phase of their prize to actually get follow-on funding and develop something that could be implemented. So that's just two examples, but we've worked very closely, also with Office of Naval Research and with other agencies, OSTP, on the marine energy side, and we'll be meeting at the White House shortly as part of an ocean science and technology discussion, and it's nice to see DOE fully sort of embraced in the broader ocean science and technology conversation.
Nice. So I don't know if this question is more for Alejandro or Hoyt, but it is, so the question is, what's the status of the public program strategy document? I think Tim Ramsey referenced this a little bit at the beginning of this talk.
Yep, it's Hoyt, I'll happily field that one. For any of our marine energy stakeholders, you'll remember a couple of years ago now, we went out with public requests for information about some of the foundational framing for a long-term marine energy R&D strategy. We have now, put together a full, well-developed, well-reviewed strategy, and we're in the process of hopefully down at the 10-yard or 1-yard line in terms of getting review and approval for that. But things like this take time, it remains to be seen. But I am always cautiously optimistic that we're going to be able to get it out in short order. But there are a lot of other objectives and priorities on time that have to get weighed for that. But we have used it as draft material, draft framing material, and things like our peer review materials. So there are ways to see what the thinking is there as it's evolved.
Great. So now moving over to Tim Welch, we have two questions specific to the hydropower program. So first off, what is the latest status with 242? So for anyone not familiar, this is the hydroelectric incentives program that was set up through the Energy Policy Act of 2005. And that is Section 242 of that act is what people commonly refer to this program as.
So in fiscal year 19, Congress appropriated $6.6 million for that particular program. We did a call for applications. So where we are at this moment is that we have 48 eligible entities this year, and those 48 entities have been notified that they are eligible, and we have received no appeals. And so right now we're in the process of utilizing our internal approval process to make sure we appropriate the money, and so we should be looking to send out the funding probably in the next month or so.
Great. And then the other question that is specific to the hydropower program. So the question is, what's the latest with the hydropower vision roadmap?
So if you recall back in 2016 when we issued the hydropower vision, the most important section of that vision document was the roadmap, which outlined 5 action areas and 64 sub-action areas that where there needed to be significant activity in order for us to realize some of the growth scenarios that were outlined in the document. In other words, 50 gigawatts of both hydropower and pump storage by the year 2050. So since that time, we have formulated a series of 5 forums across the hydropower industry and national laboratories of experts in those particular action areas. And what they have done is they've sort of done almost like a baseline assessment of exactly where we are. So with any roadmap, you can't really tell where we're going until you find out where you are at this time. So we are currently finalizing a report that sort of shows what action areas had the most activity since the issuance of the roadmap in 2016. And based on that assessment of where the most amount of activities are, where the least amount of activities are, over the next couple of years with help with our hydropower stakeholders, we're going to be revisiting the map to or the roadmap to update certain action areas, maybe eliminate those that maybe weren't really as important as we once thought they were back in 2016, or most importantly, maybe even adding some new ones. So we'll be looking forward in the next couple of years to hydropower or Hydropower Vision 2.0.
Thanks, Tim. So then we have a few questions related to the marine energy program. So Tim Ramsey, I'm going to give you, these actually came in as 2 separate teamer questions, but I'll lump them together here.
Are they softballs?
Soft to hard, somewhere in between. Yeah.
All right.
Softball, but a hard throw.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I got a good arm, Tim. So questions are, when can I expect to hear more about Teamer? And does Teamer have anything to do with the European program, Marinette?
Yeah, good question. So the first one, I did talk a little bit about it earlier, but as far as when do you expect to hear more? So as I mentioned, we did select the network director. So we have made that selection, but we are currently in negotiations with that selection with the network director, Hoyt. The plan is to have negotiations and the award finalized by the end of the calendar year. And then once we have the award finalized, then we can initiate the program. There's obviously a few steps that we'll need to take before you actually see an open opportunity for technology developers to apply to get that request for technical support. But we are trying to get that out as soon as possible. You know, it's one of the biggest objectives of the program of the Teamer program, that is to be quick and nimble and be very quick. So we do, yeah, I don't know exactly when, but look for early in calendar year 2020. Once the award's made, we'll try to get the program open and running shortly after that. And then let's see, the other part of the question, remind me, sorry.
It was how does, or the question was, does Teamer have anything with Marinette?
So no, there's no official connection to Marinette. Obviously, Marinette is a well-known program in the industry over in Europe. So we're aware of that program. When we identified the need for a similar program here in the U.S., a lot of people and stakeholders pointed to the Europeans having a program like that in Marinette. So I would say that the Marinette program, just the pros of having a program similar to Marinette informed us over here in the U.S., but there's no formal connection whatsoever.
Great. Thanks, Tim. So I'm going to paraphrase this question a little bit because it was very specific, and I want to maintain the anonymity of the the person submitting this question. Basically, this person is with a U.S. company, and he is working to form a consortium with 2 non-U.S. companies. And in this consortium, they are working together to launch an ocean current project with a pretty sizable initial investment that they're at least planning for, it sounds like. And so the question is, how can they work with the MHK program? And secondly, are there any upcoming priorities that they should be aware of that might support their efforts to commercialize ocean current energy?
Okay. So yeah, I'll try to take that one maybe in a couple different chunks. The most obvious way and probably the most desired way to work with the program is through direct funding. So through our funding competitions, our funding opportunity announcements, as well as SBIRs, prizes, and the like. As far as what is coming up in fiscal year 20. Fortunately, I cannot talk about that for a lot of the reasons Alejandro mentioned earlier and others, but we don't have a final budget yet. We're not sure exactly what our final budget will be, so we're working on some scenario planning, but not sure exactly what's going to happen, what exact opportunities will be available, and even so, to keep the integrity of competition, we're not allowed to give advance notice of those. So with all of our opportunities and competitions, we will always post those in the WaterWire. So if you aren't already signed up, definitely sign up for the WaterWire. If you're still looking at the webinar, the screen, the link in the bottom left, you'll always be informed right away as soon as we have competitions available. But that isn't the only way to work with the program. A lot of the projects that we select and the activities that we select them because we want them to have broad impact in the industry, and we want them to be translatable across industry. So going back to one of the earlier slides, you can always look at the project maps, see if there's projects out there that are working on research or activities that are of interest to you. I'm not sure what stage of development either the technology or the project is that this questioner referenced, but if you're still looking at materials or controls or different types of technologies, or if you're looking for resource assessments or even environmental monitoring technologies, if you're so far down the road that you're putting devices in the water, but you need the latest and greatest environmental monitoring software and hardware technologies, definitely check out the work that we have funded to date and are currently funding with our partners across the labs, industry, and academia, and we try to make those results as public as quickly as possible through a number of different means, including things like the MHKDR, public webinars, presentations. So probably step one is just seeing if there's information or projects out there that the program is working on that are of relevance or interest to you, and then you can follow up with us or with those projects directly. And then I guess the final thing I would say is just keep us informed. Even if we're not funding you or supporting you directly, keep us informed of your progress. We always want to know what's going on across the industry, not just the projects we're funding. So that box in the middle on the screen, the reach out to us box, Water Power Technologies Office at ee.doe.gov. That's the best way to reach out to us, and please keep us updated of your projects and your needs and any information that you want to get in front of us.
Great, thanks. So then just two last questions, and then we'll wrap up here. So I'll turn this one, I think, to Hoyt, since Hoyt and I are actually in the trenches of day-to-day ICOE planning. So the question is, why should I attend ICOE 2020? So for anyone that missed this, Tim Ramsey mentioned the International Conference on Ocean Energy, which is coming to the U.S. for the first time in the conference's history, and DOE is sponsoring.
Well, there are a number of really good reasons. The first one mostly applies to all of our friends here in the U.S., pride. We want to make this ICOE the biggest and the best attended. And I'm really excited about the way that it's shaping up. A more serious answer is I think it is going to be a really great and valuable conference. One new aspect of the conference is that it's actually going to include a dedicated technical and research track in addition to an industry and markets track. So kind of broadening the scope of the conference and some of the technical content. There are going to be a lot of great side events, workshops, the student competition, technical tours, and other meetings. And I think it's also a really great opportunity both to showcase for a lot of folks internationally who may be less familiar with all the work that's going on in the US and all the capabilities here, what those are, but it's also a great opportunity to highlight for policymakers and energy thought leaders in Washington the seriousness of the industry, right? And we're going to be, because it's in DC, we're going to be working really hard to get a lot of those people who are not necessarily part of the marine energy industry there to see what is, what's occurring and what marine energy can potentially do for them.
Great. Anything to add to that, Tim?
Just that, I mean, it's going to be an exciting event. It's going to be one of the biggest marine energy events held ever, being the biggest conference in ocean energy every other year. And this is going to be probably the best one, in my opinion, that we've held to date. So it's going to be an exciting event, a lot of activity, a lot of opportunity.
Great. And then one final question, because I know we are cutting it close now on time, but I think this is a great and important question. So Tim Ramsey here had mentioned a couple of the prizes that we had announced in the MHK program. So the question is, can I join any of these prizes? And I think that question came because we announced that for one of these prizes, we've already passed an initial phase 1 application date, but the question is, are these prizes still open, and can interested stakeholders still participate?
So I'll take the marine energy ones first, and then pass it to Welch for the hydro one, any hydro prizes. So for the first one, the marine energy collegiate competition, unfortunately that application window is closed, and you had to have submitted by that deadline in order to compete for the marine energy collegiate competition. So unfortunately, at least as a competitor, that window is closed. There's other opportunities if you want to get involved, or maybe get involved in judging, reach out to us, let us know. For the other prizes, for the Waves to Water desal prize, I did mention the first phase has closed. When phase 2 opens, it will not be restricted just to phase 1 competitors. So anyone can still apply at phase 2 for the Waves to Water desal prize. Now you do need to apply for phase 2 in order to move on to 3 and 4, but phase 2 is still open to anyone to compete. And then the Ocean Obs prize, obviously we haven't actually launched it yet. It's just been announced. So once that's open, anyone will be able to compete for that prize.
Well, on the hydro side, we don't have any open prizes right now on the hydro side, but if we did, you betcha.
Thanks. Well, thanks everyone who held on with us here through the end. Again, if you had a question that we either didn't have enough time for or you thought of later, please just send it to our general WPTO email address that you can see on the screen. And if you aren't already a subscriber to our office's WaterWire, if we haven't mentioned this enough, I definitely just encourage you to subscribe so you can stay up to date on public funding opportunities, as well as other things our offices plan and ways to engage with us, like webinars. And thank you for being with us today. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Allison.